let me share with you my process for making the sink unit under the stairs. It's high tech, not. So I started off reaching in, bearing in mind that the stairs are fitted and the cupboard is fitted under the stairs. So I went in with a piece of paper to find the width of the space. And then I worked out sort of the height of the kitchen unit I wanted, and then the depth. And I was inspired by watching a video of behind the scenes in the filming of All Creatures Great and Small, the current series of All Creatures Great and Small. And Mrs. Hall's kitchen, Mrs. Hall. And I noticed her kitchen has tongue and groove behind the sink, and then there's the sink unit in front. So it's got a sink and it's got a draining board on one side and cupboard there, and it's got a little ledge that sits out on top of the tongue and groove that she's got various bits and pieces on. And I thought I quite like that, because it reduces the depth under the stairs, because it is quite a deep space, because you wouldn't want to be really crazily tucked under there while you're trying to peel your potatoes or washing up or whatever. And then I was thinking, right, what would I have underneath? So if I tip off my trimmings, so looking down at it, I've got the sink in the middle. I'll have the draining board to the left, because I think that would fit in all right there. It's always personal taste, isn't it, whether or not you have a draining board to the right or to the left. And then looking at it from the front, there's the butler sink, and I will make that out of air drying clay to fit the space. The cupboard underneath will just have a curtain in front. That side under the draining board will have a curtain in front. Because sinks are quite messy, aren't they? So the thing is, if there's a mess made at the sink or on the draining board, because if you're doing laundry and stuff like that, things go on the draining board, everything goes on the draining board. If any mess goes down the front, you can wash the curtains. On this side, underneath a bit of worktop, bearing in mind in those days you would have used the kitchen table for most jobs, but on the worktop, underneath there would be a drawer, only one drawer. I only had one drawer in my kitchen for many, many years. And underneath that is a cupboard like a meat safe. So that would be a coolest part of the house. It would have a mesh on the front, and that's where you'd keep things cool in the days before fridges. This cottage doesn't have a fridge. And I'm pondering about what to make the front of that. I need to find some mesh. So I think I've got some old muslin that I can use, which is nicely worn. I will work on that. So that's my plan. Very high tech, isn't it? Yes, indeed. And then I got a strip of 3 centimetre by 3 centimetre wood. And I cut the pieces that I would need, laid them over my pattern. So I helped draw out the measurements by drawing round the wood. Now this is going to change slightly. That's the spare bit, I think. So a top and a bottom of the drawer. I need to make the drawer to fit in the space, but I'll do that when I'm definite about the size, and a bit at the bottom. So that sort of becomes like a unit. And then there'll be a longer, just there's that bit, yes, that's the bit that goes under the sink. And then the other night, when I should have been going to sleep, see, some people dream about holidays or handbags or whatever. I dream about kitchen planning in my doll's house. I was thinking, no, actually these need to be solid all the way back, because I thought maybe I could just do a framework with strips. No, I can't, because the sink needs to sit in a wooden framework. So I'm going to use, I haven't got any 3mm strips because it is really tough. cutting across the grain on 3mm, so I haven't ordered any of that, but I do have 2.5. 2.5 is going to be fine, so some of these bits may be redundant. So I will make the cupboard units with 2.5, and I will probably record that. I might fast forward as I'm actually doing the cutting of that, because it could be a little bit tedious to watch. This bit, so the backing board for my sink unit, I have used, these are spare bits of floorboard from when I did the floors for the cottage. If you haven't seen that, do have a look, and always save the bits you've got left. So I've used these. It's not exactly tongue and groove, but pretty near. I'm going to paint these, and I'm going to paint the same colour as the legs on my kitchen table. I'll introduce you to the kitchen table another time. Now what I'm left with, I have offered this up and checked the size of the space, and it's a little bit short of a full width. Can you see there's a little bit of spare board there? So I have checked that, and this does fit. So what I'm going to do, and I will do that now while you're watching, there's an easier way and a hard way of doing this. So I will show you the easier way. Let me get my metal rule. It is still a bit of a what's it cutting through these boards, as I talked about in the floorboard video, but it is going to be tucked right in the corner, so any defects hopefully won't be so noticeable. So we'll get that into place, and you can see there's the overhang there. Get my ruler. I could say exactly online, but then my paper isn't cut exactly with a ruler when I trimmed it upstairs. My house, my cottage, Bramble Cottage, is in my own house at the moment because it's November here and it's cold and we've had snow and heavy frost, so I've taken Bramble Cottage inside my house to keep it warm and dry. I don't want the curtains and anything getting damp, because although my cabin here is lovely, it's not part of the central heating system. So what I'm doing here is I'm going over very lightly several times with my blade, because I don't want to try and be too hasty with this, because otherwise it will jump in some way with the grain of the wood, and that's how you can easily get a split where you don't want it. So it's patience, 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 patience. Anybody that knows me knows that patience is not always my strong point. But I can be patient if I know there's a really good reason for being patient. I want to get a nice edge on this. There we go, I can see it's the ends have split. So what I might do when I'm cutting the 2.5mm is I might get the Stanley knife out of our household toolbox, because using something that is bigger in your hand when you're cutting a much thicker piece of wood actually is a lot easier. Something's touching something, I can hear it rattling to my right since I moved my table. And I've marked on here top, so I know which is the top. Most of this is going to be hidden behind the units, but it was easier to do a full size bit than just a top bit, and also it'll give my, there we are, give my units much more stability. I'm going to chuck that away because it's got a sticky back, and just give it a little sweep with the sandpaper just down the edge. So this is going to be painted. It's going to be painted, and then it's going to have like a ledge, overhanging ledge top. Not this wood, it would be something that isn't sticky backed, with some nice rounded corners at the end. And the taps will come out of here. So the pipe work, if you like, is behind this, which is part of the reason why I wanted to use these, because I haven't got pipe work. And I'll show you the taps, which I think I have handy. I have a little dishy here, which just keeps things that are floating around. I've got somewhere to put them safe. And I have got two of these tiny little taps. So they need a bit of a sand where they've got their the joins from the moulds, but I will paint them and then they will stick through. There, I can make holes and it will stick through there really easily, and that'll be lovely. Thank you, Mrs. All, for the inspiration. I might even see if there's some way I can make, might have to use a jewellery finding to make some sort of soap dish that attaches in here as well. She's got a nice soap dish. And I was thinking, could I use the top of a paper fastener? Don't know. I'll give that some thought and I will let you know what I decide. So I'm going to measure up now for my wood, and I'll find the Stanley knife and I'll see about cutting these strips to make the carcass. What I didn't explain there is the easy way or the hard way of trimming this. If I had, so that's the little teeny bit I wanted to cut off. If I'd had to try to put my ruler on this side where it's not holding my ruler flat, you'd have this wobble going on and you'd be really competing to hold your ruler in place. If you have your ruler on the thicker side, you've got much more stability for doing the cutting. So even if you need to get something else, and I've just put it away, but say another piece of the same size, so if I was insisting I wanted to cut it this way, then you find another piece of the same depth to put underneath your ruler to give it stability. But all the same, you're still trying to fight with a very fine edge. It's a lot easier to work so you can see what it is that you're cutting off, and you'll find that a lot easier and a lot more reassuring. Bearing in mind you've got a very sharp blade in your hands. You don't want it to jump out. So go with what is easiest. Right, back to cutting my wood. Let's give you some reminders about cutting these strips of wood. This isn't the hardest stuff, but it's not the easiest either. Balsa wood is by far thinner and lighter weight and thinner, less dense. This is a denser wood, obeshi, however you say it. But it's still quite robust, and the thicker the strip, the more dense it is. You always want to have it as secure as it can possibly be, and do a very light score initially and build it up. So I'm cutting across the grain first. Do your across the grain cuts first, you're less likely to get it splits. So if I started this way to cut the length that I wanted, I would quite possibly find it would split down the whole length of the wood if I wasn't careful. So it feels like it's more hard work, but cutting against the grain first. You might find it easier to measure out the wood you have to cut using the grain in your favour. So if I say I needed 4 longer bits, I would measure out the length and then I'd measure them that way. So get across the grain measured and cut first. Now I know I'm going to need 4 bits to go back to make the carcass, so I've got to cut 4 of these, and then I'll trim off a little bit off the back of each one. But if I do the whole great long length that's going to cover the 4 bits, I'm likely to get some splittage back there. So hey ho, just gotta, it's one of those things you've just got to suck it up and cope with it. But this is the advantage of not choosing the thickest wood that's available to you for what you have to make. If you can make it with thinner wood, do that. I've decided to go for this partly because I think I quite probably want to use this up. Actually, I've got quite a lot of 2.5 and it feels like the right idea because I want to have it looking fairly deep, the bits that you're going to see at the front. Yeah, anyway, it's the choice that I'm happy with. But do across the grain first and then flow with the grain afterwards. This is the unit I have made for Bramble Cottage. Oh, it's just finding the focus. And it's sort of fitted, but not really fitted. It's my kind of it's my kind of fitting, really. So I will show you when Bramble Cottage is the right way up. At the moment it's upside down while I sort out the beams in the ceiling, and I messed up my numbering, so I've got to stain one more. So I used, this is my high-tech measuring. So leaning in, because it's really tricky because it's right at the back of the cottage. I haven't done a cutting list or anything because this is bespoke to the space, and the chances of you having something the same size are 0 to none, really. But leaning in, measuring against the under the stairs cupboard from the wall, I've got it as far as with a piece of paper that it's not holding focus, is it? Sorry, this camera maybe isn't the best idea. Getting the size that way and then working out the depth that I wanted it. And then if I show you this other bit of high-tech jiggery pokery. So then I drew a plan, if you can see this, drew a plan of how I wanted it to look. Maybe I'll include a photo of that and then you can see that more clearly. And then looking down from the top what it would look like. And then I basically got the strips of wood over the plan and measured out my the bits I had to cut. I knew I wanted to draw and I wanted a meat safe below. So with lots of fiddling and fettling and reaching in and offering up and tweaking, this is what I've come up with. So I'm going to make a sink here, like a butler sink, out of white air dried clay. this is the drawer, and I have made a drawer and it does fit in. And what I'm going to do so that it doesn't fall out is I have made a back of the drawer, and I will stick that in when I'm ready for it to be in position. So it'll come so far and then it won't come out, so then it won't fall out. This is going to have a worktop bit over it. Obviously I put a handle on there, and then this is going to be the meat safe. So these are cupboards that you'd have. They'd often be lead lined, maybe, certainly metal lined to keep them cool, because in the days before fridges, where do you keep your cheese or whatever cool? So I made a door frame. I'm going to put some fabric, stick some fabric on the inside, some muslin. This camera doesn't like holding focus, does it? And I've got a little piece at the bottom to be part of the frame, but I'll put pins in the edges. I'll show you this as I do it to give it a hinge effect. Then these bits here and here are going to have curtaining fabric. And if you look on the video, I think I've been able to link it, but if not, have a look at, I'll put it in the comments, of a link to a behind the scenes for All Creatures Great and Small, the current edition, and it shows Mrs. All's kitchen. So this side will have a draining board on it, and I'm painting all of this wooden area around it a sort of a creamy greeny colour, which is a colour I remember in my grandmother's kitchen. And I will also do this kitchen table that I have already made. And so I need to make the draining board, I need to cut the worktop here, I need to make the sink, I need to finish the cupboard front, and I need to finish the drawer, and obviously make the curtains. But today I've just sanded this, and I need to make some paint, mix up some paint, see if I can get anything like the colour I have in mind, and we'll see. So I've got a bit of, I don't want to get out all my boxes of all my other paints, so I'm using what I've got to hand. That's Cerulean Blue. This is a bit of Buff Titanium. I'm just making this up as I go along. Yellow and blue make green, but I know the sort of green shade I have in mind, so we'll see how it comes out. So I'm mixing this paint on a paper palette. Oh, sorry, you can't see that, lovely. Paper palette. I got get these from the works. Lots of places you can get them, and they're really quite cheap, but they're great for mixing paint on. Now that's not far off, but it's a bit too bluey. So when you think you're nearly there with the colour, then you need to mix a load more to make sure you've got enough for what you're making, what you're painting. So that's too blue. Let's add some medium yellow. These are quite cheap paints, so you can get them anywhere just to play with, and it's not precious, so use what you have. I think I'm going to add some white into that. It's finally warming up in here. It's been really cold today. And I've had the heater on all day, and I've been in here because there were all sorts of jobs that I wanted to do that would have meant carrying far too much stuff backwards and forwards into my kitchen. So that's far too bluey, but we're getting there. I've got a colour in my mind. It's getting nearer. I find if I mix with a palette knife, then I can get a good blend of colour, but without my brush being clogged up with a particular colour. You might think you've blended it all in, but then find a great bunch of blue stuck in the hairs of your brush that comes out unexpectedly. Well, I've got to get near it because I've got quite a lot of paint here. So let's add a bit more buff titanium. Ooh, we've got a little, that's the sort of the dried on edge. Put that to one side. And sometimes you just got to play to see if you can get it anywhere near what you have in your mind. That actually is not far off. I think I might go with that actually. Yes, I think I will. Right, paintbrush. What shall I use? Where are my favourites? There's that one. Let's go with that one. If you haven't seen my video on brushes, I will link it up in the cards on the corner of this video, so don't get yourself in a tizzy over brushes. Let's move that out of the way. See how this looks. If it's not right, I can always change it. Ooh. So that's coming out sort of a palish green. It's not terribly terribly good coverage at the moment. I'm going to paint the bits that are seen. I'm not going to paint inside all the cupboards, because you wouldn't have painted all the inside of your cupboards long ago. And something I want to show you about this kitchen, this end here is really quite rough. Just wait for the camera to get back in focus. I'm so sorry about this. I'm going to have to go back to using my phone to record. So this is quite rough with a few different botch pieces, and you can see on the inside as well. And this is in homage to some of the kitchen cabinetry that I have had in the past, where it's been a bit of a botched job of various different cupboard units and all, you know, it's like, it's the whole sort of make, do and mend thing. So I thought I will include a bit of that in my Bramble Cottage kitchen because it isn't high end. It's a nod to creature comforts, but it is a rustic cottage. I know the draining board is going over here, but I will still paint this bit. So what I particularly wanted was this, let's call it a backsplash. And I could see this very clearly in Mrs. Hall's kitchen. It's a bit more of a muted green than this, but I do love colour, and often in old places they would have used up paint wherever they could use it. You know, they didn't go down to the local hardware DIY place and buy paint. If anybody had any paint, they made the most of it. In fact, having any coloured paint in the house was probably quite swish. I don't know when we started getting you know, more sort of household paints. Prior to that, I think everything would have been whitewashed. But anyway, I'm going to go down the back here because otherwise I've got to have an end space. And so this panelling at the back, oh, camera. This panelling at the back is made again with floorboards. So I cut a template on paper of the size that I wanted it, and I knew I wanted it coming up, and I wanted this ledge on the top. So I'm going to put some soap on there, going to put the taps under here. But I knew I wanted to have the sort of the, what would they call it, wainscot? I'm not sure. Anyway, the boarding at the back. So I thought what will be good for that would be the floorboards technique. And I've done a little chunky reinforcement piece there. And this kitchen would have been used for everything. So the laundry would have been done at the sink, obviously all the vegetable preparation, all the cooking, baking, washing up, all of that stuff, it all would have been using this sink. There is, I am going to be putting a sink in a vanity unit in the bathroom, the lean-to bathroom. But this is where, if you like, the utility aspect of the house, the cottage, everything was done. I don't know when utility rooms came in the UK, and this cottage is based in the UK, there's no denying that. I've never, well, no, that's not true. I have lived in Australia and the Channel Islands, but I don't know about other countries other than Australia. When did utility rooms come in? I haven't lived with a utility room until now, actually. This long. It's all just been, the washing machine has been in the kitchen. Am I going to do in there? Yes, I'll do in there. I will do in the insides because I can, and I've got plenty of paint. I'm doing underneath the sink because the sink isn't going to fill the gap completely. You will see the woodwork down round the edges of the sink. And remember, this is whatever it is that you're making, it is your project and you can make it however you want to make it. So if there is something, say like that you remember in a grandparent's house or something like that, you can incorporate that if you wish into your project. It doesn't have to be historically accurate, because there are plenty of properties that we're still living in different ways, if you like. Not everybody has an up-to-date style house. I am going to do inside here. I've changed my mind because it would just look tidier, and when you open the curtain to get things out, you can see the nice screen. Now, the reason often people had curtains under sinks, under kitchen units, A, is because it saved on wood. You could easily run up some curtaining. But B, if you have a flood of some sort with doing the laundry at the sink or washing the baking things, you can easily wash the curtain. If, say, you did have all wood underneath cupboards and stuff, they're more likely to warp, but it just takes the expense of the project into another level. So for most homes, they would have just had the curtain, and I don't know when that first came in. I did do a bit of research online. Oh, I like that. I like that on the top. That will show off the taps and the bits and pieces that I put on the top there. I have sanded down this front edge just so it softens it. It's not quite as angular. So this bit is going to go against the wall. So let's see if I can tilt you up a little bit. So this bit is against the wall. If you like, the plumbing is behind there. So I deliberately had it coming out from the wall, because otherwise it makes it an incredibly deep unit and deep sink. And if you've got a space under the stairs, it can really feel like you're in a cupboard. But it's making best use of the space, having the sink under there. But it needs to be accessible, and I am putting in a fake window. Yes, the fake window is still part of the plan. I haven't painted the picture. I've decided I will cut a picture out of a magazine. My painting skills are more abstract than representational, and I couldn't get a picture that I liked. I wasn't happy with it, so I will acknowledge my skill set is limited for painting the pictures. So I want it to be sort of like a garden view out of the window by the kitchen, but there's also a fake window upstairs in the bedroom, and I want that to be more sort of a distant view. And I think I'm going to have it as a sort of a bit of a, in the distance you can see the sea, because I love living by the sea, and I don't at the moment. I live in Shropshire, so in my cottage there's going to be a distant view of the sea. And my houses, wherever I've lived, have always been high up. I do not like living low sea level. I have lived by the sea, but it's always been where it's been a quite steep shoreline. I have a thing about flood risks. When you live by the Severn, the River Severn in Shropshire, you know what the flood risks are, and you do not choose low ground if you can avoid it. And if you ever watch Escape to the Country and they go, oh look, there's a little stream at the bottom of the garden. Yes, how lovely. Go back and visit again in February or something after heavy rain and see what the flood risks are, because what can be a little stream one day can be a raging torrent another. I've never lived in a house that floods for that reason, fortunately, but I do know people who have, and it's thoroughly miserable. So this is a little bit richer than I had in mind. I think when I do the table, I might sand off some bits. I'm only going to paint the undersides of the table because it's a working kitchen table. So if you imagine baking bread on it, and as well as eating off it, and actually the ironing, what ironing was done, would be done at the kitchen table. Put a towel on the table. Didn't have ironing boards. So how's that looking? It's green. It's certainly green, and I will show it to you with the fabric in a minute. Let's just... Oh, now I want to do that silver inside there, because that is metal lined, so that needs to be painted differently. Well remembered, Sue. I'm going to paint this bit at the bottom here, although that's going to have an extra bit on it. We'll just go over there. And this bit at the side is going to be tucked away, but we'll still paint it just for now, just to make sure there's no gappage. If you paint more than you need to paint, then you're not going to get caught out with something not being covered. Well, I'm liking that. It's very green, but it won't look so green by the time the sink's on it. And it is right at the back of the cottage, as I say, so that will help with the colour. We'll just go down this bit here. Again, this is going to be against the wall, so yeah, so the kitchen, one particular kitchen I had, they had great holes in the back of the kitchen units, and you could just see the brickwork of the house through there, and yes, no fancy dancy back of cupboards there in that kitchen. And I've had a lot of kitchens over the years, so there's been plenty of variety. Just go over a couple of bits. Right, love that. Sorry, you're in the shade a bit. Let's turn that to one side. If I turn that light off, is that any better? I've got my sad light on because it's really dark here in the gloomy day today. So this is the fabric, which has got little tiny pink flowers, little tiny specks of blue on it, and sort of dusty green foliage, but I think that will look really lovely when that's made into the curtains. So we'll just move that over to dry. As usual, I've got, need to paint the front of my drawer. I'm not going to attempt to paint the sides, but what I am going to paint is a little bit of the side, and then it sort of goes into wear. We'll paint the top and the sides there. I'm not going to paint the inside. Might put a bit of wallpaper in there from somewhere else, don't know. So that's the drawer, and I need to do this bit and this bit. So this is the front of the cupboard, meat safe. Oh yes, what was I saying? I haven't used a particularly good brush here because I knew I was going to be scrabbling around painting the boards at the back. So this is not the best brush, but it's good for a bit of rough painting. But I say, visit my video on brushes. I know I need to do there because I'm going to attach I've got some muslin that I'm going to use as well, it would have been mesh, so I'm going to use the muslin as the mesh. And how am I going to do this? I need to lean this. Maybe I just hold it and get painty. And I don't mind with this because I don't mind if some of the paint wears off. That's okay. And I'm going to paint all 4 long sides of this because I don't know which side is going to be the outside front. So all of them done? Yeah. Right, just do the table legs. And then I'm going to sand this a little bit to take off some of the paint because it would have been knocked off with kicks and scuffs and stuff like that. I'm going to paint under the table here. But I think I'm going to use a better brush for this. So you can imagine that this maybe was all green at some point, this table, but over time the paint has worn off. that's a bit too much paint there, and I haven't got a piece of tissue handy. Let's fish it out of my bin. So what I'm going to have to do there is I'm going to have to sand along that bit where I've got a bit carried away with the paint. It is a good idea to just check with yourself now and again that you are painting the right thing and not getting carried away. Once I get going with paint, I could be painting everything in sight. So just give the legs a light paint and then I can sand them back a bit. Did I use a template or anything for this table? No, I just sort of made it up as I went along. I took a measurement of my own kitchen table at home and using the 1/12 scale, inch to a foot, reduced it down. And I used a piece of paper, a template, to think, does that look right? Does it look too big? And at first it was going to be rectangular. It's just sort of, I think, is it square? No, it's off square. It is a bit rectangular, but it's not as long as it was originally I had thought about doing. And I like to keep things flexible, so how I will dress the table one day, you'll see Bramble Cottage another day, probably in another video, and it'll be dressed with different things. It's not going to be a permanent dress, as it were. The things that are fitted in the house, for want of a better term, will stay the same. Like, you're not going to suddenly see the sink in a different place, but other things will change. Right. So there we are. Under bits painted, not the underside of the table because that wouldn't have been painted, but bits painted, and I'm going to rough up the top of the table a bit more, and I'm going to wax that somehow. I don't want to put a varnish on it, but I want to put a bit of colour and staining and stuff, but it's going to have all sorts of stuff on it at different times, so you'll not see an awful lot of the top of the table. Right, I need to find a little container to put the rest of this paint in, because I will never be able to match that up again, so in case I need some for touch-ups, which I probably will. So I'll find a container to put the paint in and clean up, and I'll show you when it's dry. Okay. So I have painted with, I think it's gold enamel paint, which I decided was the nearest we were going to get to brass. These little tiny taps, because they were white metal moulded. I tend to use, I don't know where I got this from, but this is a sort of, well, it'd be part of like packaging. It's not polystyrene. It doesn't close up quite as polystyrene, but it's polystyrene kind of stuff. And I've always used this for, oh, it's made in sheets, look, and bonded together. When I've been making jewellery or painting little teeny weeny things, but of course it's perfect for miniatures. So I've stuck the end of the taps in there. I've had a bit of a tidy up, and I was just on to the next bit prior to going in and having some tea. It's gone dark because we are December now. So this is drying beautifully. There's a couple of little bits between the grooves I might just go over with a tiny paintbrush. Let me grab one to remind me. Before I go in, I have put, there's only a little bit of paint left, but I put that in a little teeny weeny jam jar. Tend to get these from the National Trust. They're often giving them away in the coffee shop. And I have painted the inside of this with Rust-Oleum, a pewter paint. It's water-based. Oh, I need to go over there a little bit more. Get different light on it and you can see what's missing. But this is going to be the hinge of the door and the door frame. That needs to, I need to attach that. Here it is. I need to attach that when I've got the door ready, because the part of the door fitting will go into that. So it's all drying beautifully, nearly done. Just touch up some little bits there. But what I wanted to show you, because I realised I was doing it without the camera on, I tend to use these, this has been in grey paint, so it looks really disgusting, muslin face cloths when I wash my face. And what it is, it's double thickness. I hadn't realised they're sort of stitched in together. But when you snip them apart very carefully, so there I've got a very fine gauze. So this is going to be the metal grill for the front of my cupboard. And I'd got as far as getting the glue out, and I suddenly thought, oh, I need to record this. So let's put the glue on this door frame. I was thinking, how can I stretch it? It might not be stretched. So this is on the inside of the door frame. Oh, it's raining again, I can hear. Oh, the joys of December. I do struggle a bit in the winter months, so I have a sad light on here in my cabin, which is incredibly bright, and it does mess up the lighting a bit for recording, but we don't want me getting all gloomy. It's been a very good day today. I've done all sorts of little catching up bits, and so let's get this on here. I want it to mesh to be fairly straight, and I think what I might do, I'm going to tape this to the paper, and then tomorrow, once it's dry, I will trim it off. And then I will paint the inside of the door frame. got a nice bit of tension there. To make sure this is all gluey. Even Max didn't come out with me today. Too cold, he says. He's going to stay on the bed. But he does like to be out here with me when I'm doing things. So, I'm happy with that. Let's hope it dries the way I think it will. See no reason why it shouldn't. And then tomorrow, or once it's dry, I will trim off the edges and I will put some more paint on this mesh. Let's call it mesh now. It's stopped being fabric, it's become mesh. And I will paint on the inside. So I want this to look a little bit more grey, silvery. So it looks less less like a bit of muslin and more like metal grill work. I'm sure it'll do that once it's dried. And so what am I going to do now? I'm just going to touch up this these bits that haven't taken quite so well with the paint. Let's do that now with my paint. Move that out the way a bit. This is where it's really good to hang on to some paint, because you don't always know how well things have taken until they're drying, and then you think, ooh, that could be a bit better. Fact is that nobody is going to get close enough to see, but I know. And it's about how we feel ourselves about a project is what's important. We have our own level of, that'll do, when you reach the point where you think you're happy with it. But so the sink's going there, so that won't be seen much. Where did I see a bit? Oh yes, down here. I want to do a bit more here, although there's a bit of the frame going there, and I want to go there, although that's where the hinge is. And there's a bit more here, although you won't see that because that's well behind the curtain. Bit more there, bit more there. What it does mean is if I'm happy with it, then I can do close-up shots inside, and I can show you what it's like without thinking, oh, don't look at my shoddy paintwork. So yeah, quite happy with that. I always think if something's too perfect, it doesn't look very realistic. So leave some imperfections. And also, as somebody who's doing videos, you could call them tutorials, but videos to show my process, so help other people to figure out their process. If it's perfect, then it feels unachievable for other people. I would rather you look at it and think, I could do better than that, and feel inspired to do it. So does the drawer, I think the drawer needs a bit more, just for the front bit. I don't know how this paint is going to stand up for tomorrow. We'll see, but that's good. So, I'm itching to stick the cupboard together, but I can't. Got to let that dry. Just do a bit more on here, this bottom piece. I could just go on and on and on. But there comes a time when you've got to stop, and I know Paul will come home hungry, so we'll have tea ready for him. So what haven't I done today? What I would like to do is I've got this I think somebody said was a flag from, might have been at McDonald's or something like that, I don't know. Anyway, it's a friend and she gave me this because it's like a straw, but it's more robust than a straw. And she said that might come in useful. So yes, thank you, because I don't go to McDonald's. So what I'm looking at is, see this chimney here? What I want to make is a flue coming up there. Obviously it'll be painted black and it'll go into the wall. I will angle it to go into the wall. It's not quite the same circumference, but you're not going to notice that at an angle. So I just need to do some cutting with that, bit of measuring, bit of cutting, bit of painting. See how I feel. I might come back out this evening and do that. And the other thing is I need to finish the slate for the top of my chimney pot. I've done a rough Payne's grey over it. I need to do some more. And I painted my chimney pot. I think that's as much as I'm going to do on it, except for where it joins the slate like that. This is going to be more grey with some greeny, growthy stuff on it. But I need it stuck on the roof to get the colour correct with how I've greened up the roof. I need to do something, make that more textured grey, the slate. And then I'll put some greeny growth on it. Could always try and make a buddleia to stick out the top, but I won't do that. In case you've seen me, I tend to use these. I'm celiac, so I don't eat many pies or cakes, but I am partial to a gluten-free mince pie when they become available. So I do save the plastic trays because they're very useful for paint. So I will finish up that. And oh, the other thing I have done, while I had my goldy brassy paint out, I painted the tap on this. This is the sink unit for my vanity in the bathroom. And I'd found a little, when the local model shop was closing down, he sold me a little tiny bag of all sorts of bits. Now I think this is something to do with a ship because it's got all sorts of other bits of ship's rigging in the little bag. But I thought, Oh, that's perfect for a plug for my sink, but it's brass. So I wanted to paint the tap, which was sort of silvery, into more of a sort of a brass colour, brassy copper. So that's drying, that's done, and I haven't made the vanity unit yet for the bathroom. That's going to be shortly, but I think that's it for now, and keep you posted. Hello lovely, Sue here. Today I'm experimenting a bit with wood stains, and I am using coffee and tea because I want to stain the draining board for my Bramble Cottage kitchen unit, and also I've got a bit of a worktop there to go above the drawer and the meat safe. So they're not quite, it's not quite finished off. I've still got to make the sink and various bits and pieces. You can follow all of that on Patreon, but I thought I'd share with you the tea coffee experiment. I haven't done this before, so this is as new to me as it is to you, but let's see what happens. So on this little tiny piece of wood, so this is the same sort of wood as I've made my worktops from, this obeshi wood, and I've written coffee on the back of there, and I've written tea on the back of that one. So, and this is just black instant coffee. It is caffeinated coffee, it's not decaf. Don't know if that makes any difference for the colour or not. I might experiment another day and see. This is just ordinary black tea. I've taken the tea bag out, and this is seriously strong tea. There's no milk in it, but it's just very strong. So I use a different paintbrush for each so I don't cross-contaminate. So let's give it a bit of a try. I will just wet my paintbrush first. And so this is coffee. Let's see what happens. I know you can dye clothes with tea to take off the whiteness. This might need a couple of coats, so that's coffee. Actually, let's do another splodge on straight away. The wood is soaking up the fluid very well. And the tea, I'll wet my paintbrush first. Go on the other side, so not the side that says tea, I'm going on the plain side. And I wonder what, if it's different brands of tea, you'd get a different colour. You know, nice Yorkshire tea might give you a stronger colour because that's a nice strong tea. They both look very similar at this point. Not a lot in it, is it? But actually it's quite a nice colour. I might do the top of my kitchen table in one of those. Just a very light coat, just to make it look a little bit more old pine. I don't want to put the proprietary wood stain on there because then it would all be a bit too samey as the other pine. Sorry, I've got light oak, I'm wrong. I've got light oak. I haven't been able to get hold of any pine stains so far. So a little bit of either tea or coffee might be quite good. So I'm going to leave those to dry, and I will probably do a couple more coats, but I will, so that's times 1, and it's 235. I'll do a couple more coats and I'll let you know how they get on. I'll show you the finished article, because you might find it really useful yourself rather than having to go and find more wood stains. And I wonder what gravy browning would do. Intriguing. I'll talk to you soon.